the next order of business in the NFL, which is the owners' meeting next week. And lost amongst the Caleb Williams Pro Day hoopla was the competition committee making official what is exactly going to be presented to membership, to the 32 owners of the NFL to vote up or down on. What are the rule changes that are out front and center for next week's owners meeting, Tom?
Well, the swivel hip drop tackle is a big one. We know that the NFL, the competition committee, everyone wants it out of the game at a league level, at a team level. However, the union has said in the past and doubled down again in the statement yesterday, saying they oppose any efforts to outlaw it. And there's multiple reasons for that. Among them, just, the consistency of whether or not it gets called. You already have players being fined and players having to appeal and the union being involved in those appeals. And here's one more thing on officials' plates, but it's also, the hip drop, the swivel hip drop tackle, whatever they're calling it now, evolved out of taking the head out of the game. It evolved from Pete Carroll and hawk tackling that's 10, 12, 15 years old. And that was all about, it came from rugby, and it was about get your head to the side, grab them, twist your body, and basically roll. It's a grab and roll type of a technique. That then evolved into, okay, guys now dropping their weight onto the back of the ankle. And, the NFL give a presentation to all of us back at the Combine, trying to explain kind of how these would be officiated. And there's some, they showed like a dozen of them. And there were some where you're like, man, like that's clearly, the way Logan Wilson tackles Mark Andrews. We all can look at that and go, you don't want to see that. But there's other ones where it's like a quarterback in the pocket and the pass rusher grabs him from behind. And because he can't drop his weight on him, instead he kind of sinks back and pulls him down. And they're saying that now is also going to be a penalty and a fine. When they began to outlaw this style of tackling in rugby, they actually started with fines, not suspensions, in terms of international rugby leagues. And so could you see guys getting fined as opposed to, penalties within the game as opposed to suspensions? This is all part of the conversation. Usually when the league, when Roger Goodell, when the competition committee wants something, they end up getting it. And so they're saying that it's, it's three components. It's the grab, it's the swivel around the side, and it's dropping your weight on the back of the ball carrier's legs. And they'll probably over-enforce it in the preseason, which is usually what we see. And then by regular season, it kind of, evens out a little bit. So that's going to be a big one that's going to be discussed. I would anticipate, though, that they're going to push that rule through. If anything, maybe it gets tabled till May, but I don't think hip drop tackles will be allowed in the NFL by the time we get to the fall of 2024. And then kickoffs is another huge one.
Before you get to the kickoffs, though, Tom, didn't the NFLPA already send out a statement saying the language for the hip drop tackle rule change that's out there it's confusing? There's no way you're going to be able to officiate it properly, and therefore they don't agree with it at all. I mean,
they have a seat at the table in these discussions, but ultimately they don't have a vote. They're in there. They have representatives that are in the meetings at the Combine, so they can influence the process. They can make public statements. But if the league wants to do it, the league will do it. And they've made abundantly clear that that's their intention. The kickoff play is something that special teams coordinators have been tackling for about a decade now because of the injury data and the concussion rate, the injury rate on kickoffs relative to any other play. And it's changed like 4 of the last 5 years. There have been different kickoff rules. What the NFL had last year was a non-competitive play. And there was something like, I don't know the exact percentage, but it was really, really low in terms of kickoffs that were returned at all, including 0 kickoff returns in the Super Bowl for the first time ever. So what they've done, they don't want it to be called the XFL rule because we're the NFL and we're not talking about XFL, but it's a variation thereof where essentially the kicker is still back at the 35-yard line, but all the setup players are on the plus side of the 50. I believe it's the 40 and the 35. And so what you're trying to reduce is all that run up that creates the force and the velocity that can lead to awkward collisions and can lead to injuries. You're taking that away. And there's all these different permutations of what happens. If you kick the ball into the setup zone versus if you kick it short of the setup zone. If you kick it through the end zone, you're essentially penalized for that. There's unsportsmanlike conducts if certain things happen on kickoffs. There's all kind of stuff. But the bottom line is what the special teams coordinators wanted to create was a reduction in the speed and space, but preserving enough space you can at least have strategy. And you're going to get real returns. And so they were tasked with how do you increase returns while decreasing the injury rate to a palatable number. They think that they've gotten to a good place on this moving forward. Onside kicks, you're going to have to declare it. The surprise onside kick is going to be dead. There have been proposals put forward a number of times, namely by the Eagles, about a 4th and 20 alternative and things like that. The league generally has viewed that as gimmicky. Doesn't mean that you can't get there eventually. But, essentially, if you declare an onside kick, everybody's going to come back. It's going to look like what kickoffs looked like last year. So there's a lot there, and there's going to be a lot of discussion about it. But all 32 special teams coordinators were met in person at the Combine to go through this. And it's basically, hey, we can't go back. We're never going back. We want to have the kickoff in the game. We have to find a way to make it safer, but also encourage returns. And, in talking to a bunch of the special teams coordinators, I can tell you, on one hand, they're very annoyed because they literally have to create entirely new strategy every year because the rule keeps changing every year. On the flip side of it, now they can earn their paychecks and they can, have a little fun and show some creativity and come up with ways that you can have returns. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out. And if anything, there's no way it can be a whole lot worse than last year where the kickoff was basically just a ceremonial play.
What else is expected at the owners' meeting? What else? Are we going to get the usual announcement of schedule? A couple of major announcements on the schedule front, or any business deals?
There's usually a couple of those. There's business-related matters. A big part of it, though, too, is the coaches and the general managers, namely the coaches, all speak to the media. In a lot of cases, it's the first time that any of them have talked about free agency moves, trades. I know I'm talking to Matt Eberflus before the coaches' breakfast, I believe on Tuesday morning. And so, first time talking to him about what exactly is going to happen with the number one pick in quite a while. It's been fascinating from afar just to watch how this has played out, because obviously Caleb Williams is approaching the process differently than anybody else. I saw, Eberflus and Ryan Poles and company, dapping up Caleb after his throwing session at the pro day at USC. We still got 35 days till the NFL draft. I think that the feeling within the league is still that they'd be shocked if it's anyone other than Caleb Williams who goes number one overall. But there's still a lot of time left for various conversations to happen, and for Caleb Williams maybe to declare his intentions a little bit by seeing what buildings he's willing to get on planes to go into before the draft.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.